You know, there comes a moment in your life when you begin to see things differently. The veil lifts, the fog clears, and suddenly you're not the same person you were yesterday. This awakening, this spiritual consciousness that floods into your being, it changes everything. But here's what most people don't tell you about this transformation. There are certain things, certain precious truths that you must keep sacred. You must protect them. Not because you're being secretive or dishonest, but because speaking about them to the wrong people at the wrong time can drain your energy, diminish your power, and set you back on your path. I'm going to share with you today 5 things that, when you're spiritually awake, you should never reveal to just anyone. And I'm going to explain why protecting these aspects of your spiritual life isn't about being closed off or superior. It's about honoring the divine work that's happening within you. It's about respecting the sacred process of your own transformation. The first thing you must never casually reveal to others is your spiritual experiences. When you begin to wake up spiritually, things happen. You might have profound meditations where you feel connected to everything in the universe. You might have moments of clarity where answers come to you seemingly out of nowhere. You might experience synchronicities that are so perfect, so precise, that they take your breath away. You might even have experiences that some would call mystical or transcendent. These are precious. These are sacred. These are the jewels of your spiritual awakening. But here's what happens when you rush to tell everyone about these experiences. First, most people won't understand. They can't understand because they're not where you are. They haven't had the same awakening, and that's not a judgment against them. It's simply a fact. When you try to explain a spiritual experience to someone who hasn't had one, it's like trying to explain the color red to someone who has never seen. The words don't capture it. The explanation falls flat. And what was profound for you becomes diminished in the translation. Second, when you share your spiritual experiences with people who aren't ready to hear them, you often encounter skepticism, mockery, or dismissal. Now, you might think you're strong enough to handle that. You might think their opinions don't matter. But let me tell you something about energy. When someone dismisses your spiritual experience, when they roll their eyes or laugh or tell you you're being ridiculous, they're sending negative energy towards something that was pure and beautiful for you. And that negative energy, it affects you more than you realize. It plants seeds of doubt. It makes you question yourself. It diminishes the power of what you experienced. I've seen this happen so many times. Someone has a beautiful, transformative spiritual experience. They're filled with light and love and understanding. And then they make the mistake of sharing it with a family member or coworker who isn't on the same path. That person responds with skepticism or concern or condescension. And suddenly, the person who had the experience begins to doubt themselves. Maybe I was just imagining it, they think. Maybe it wasn't real after all. And just like that, the gift is tarnished. The third reason to protect your spiritual experiences is that they're meant for you. They're personal communications between you and the divine, between you and your higher self, between you and the universe. When you broadcast them to everyone, you're diluting their power. You're taking something that was meant to transform you and turning it into entertainment or conversation. There's a sacredness to silence. There's a power in keeping certain things close to your heart. This doesn't mean you can never share your spiritual experiences. There are times and places and people with whom sharing is appropriate. If you're with someone who is genuinely on a spiritual path, someone who will honor what you're sharing, someone who can hold space for your experience without judgment, then sharing can be beautiful. It can deepen your connection. It can help both of you grow. But these people are rare, and you'll know them when you find them. You'll feel safe with them. You'll sense that they can receive what you're offering without diminishing it. The second thing you must protect is your spiritual practices. When you wake up spiritually, you naturally develop practices that nourish your soul. Maybe you meditate every morning. Maybe you do yoga. Maybe you spend time in nature communing with the trees and the sky. Maybe you journal. Maybe you pray. Maybe you chant. Maybe you do energy work. Whatever your practices are, they're yours. They're working for you. They're helping you grow and expand and connect. But when you start telling everyone about your practices, several things can happen, and none of them are good. First, people might judge you. They might think you're weird or strange or too far out there. And again, their judgment carries energy that can affect you. It can make you self-conscious about your practices. It can make you feel like you need to defend or explain yourself. And that's a distraction from the work itself. Second, People might try to talk you out of your practices. They might say, that's a waste of time, or you could be doing something more productive, or I don't see how sitting still and breathing is helping anybody. And if you're not firmly rooted in your practices, if you haven't yet experienced their full power, these voices can sway you. They can make you doubt. They can make you quit before you've really given yourself a chance to transform. Third, when you talk too much about your spiritual practices, you're using the energy that should be going into the practices themselves. There's only so much energy available to you at any given time. When you spend that energy talking about meditation, you're not meditating. When you spend that energy explaining your practice to skeptics, you're not doing the practice. It's like someone who talks about writing a book but never actually writes. All the energy goes into the talking and none goes into the doing. I remember meeting someone years ago who spent hours telling everyone about their meditation practice. They would go on and on about the techniques they were learning, the insights they were having, the changes they were making. But when I asked them how often they actually meditated, they admitted it was only a few minutes here and there. All their energy was going into talking about meditation, not into actually meditating. Don't be that person. Do the work in silence. Let the results speak for themselves. The third thing you must never reveal carelessly is your spiritual goals and aspirations. When you wake up spiritually, you begin to have different goals than you had before. Maybe you want to become more loving. Maybe you want to transcend your ego. Maybe you want to live in a state of constant peace. Maybe you want to serve others from a place of pure compassion. Maybe you want to raise your consciousness to the point where you're living in alignment with divine will. These are beautiful goals. These are worthy aspirations. But here's the problem with sharing them prematurely. When you tell people about your spiritual goals before you've achieved them, you're opening yourself up to their doubt, their skepticism, and their projections. Most people are so locked into the ego's way of thinking that they can't even conceive of the goals you're setting for yourself. They can't imagine living without anger because they're angry every day. They can't imagine transcending fear because they're ruled by fear. They can't imagine putting others before themselves because they're completely self-focused. So when you tell them your spiritual goals, they respond from their limitations, not from your possibilities. They say things like, that's impossible, or that's not realistic, or you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And these words, even if you consciously dismiss them, seep into your subconscious. They create resistance, they create doubt, they make your path harder than it needs to be. There's also another danger in sharing your spiritual goals too early. The ego loves recognition, it loves praise, it loves being seen as special or evolved or enlightened. And when you tell people about your spiritual goals and they respond with admiration or interest, your ego gets fed. And here's the tricky part, that ego gratification can actually become a substitute for doing the real work. You get the good feelings from people thinking you're spiritual without actually having to do the hard work of transformation. I've watched this happen so many times. Someone announces to everyone that they're on a spiritual path. People are impressed. They say, wow, that's amazing, you're so enlightened. And the person basks in that recognition, but they never actually do the work. They never actually face their shadows. They never actually transform. They just keep talking about their spiritual goals while living exactly the same way they always have. Keep your spiritual goals to yourself. Work on them in silence. Transform in private. And when people notice the changes in you, when they see that you're more peaceful, more loving, more centered, more joyful, then you'll know the work is real. You won't need to announce it. Your presence will announce it for you. The fourth thing you must protect is your spiritual knowledge and insights. As you wake up, you begin to understand things you didn't understand before. You see patterns, you recognize truths, you grasp concepts that used to confuse you. This knowledge is precious. It's hard-won. You've earned it through your practice, through your dedication, through your willingness to look within and do the work. But here's what you need to understand about spiritual knowledge. It's experiential. It's not something you can simply transfer to another person through words. You can tell someone about a spiritual truth, but unless they've had the experience that reveals that truth to them, your words are just concepts. They're just ideas. They don't have the power to transform. When you share your spiritual insights with people who haven't done the work to receive them, several things happen. First, they often misunderstand. They take your words and filter them through their own limited understanding, and they come away with something completely different than what you meant. Second, they often dismiss your insights as naive or simplistic, because spiritual truths often are simple, but they're not simplistic. There's a difference. The truth that love is the answer sounds simplistic to someone who hasn't understood what real love is. But to someone who has experienced divine love, who has felt the transformative power of true compassion, those words carry the weight of the universe. Third, when you share your insights too freely, you can create resentment or resistance in others. They feel like you're claiming to know more than they do. They feel like you're being superior or condescending, and they push back, they argue, they debate. And suddenly, you're in an ego battle about spiritual truths, which is the most absurd contradiction there is. The ancient teachers knew this. That's why they taught that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. That's why they spoke in parables and metaphors. That's why they were selective about who they taught certain things to. It wasn't because they were elitist. It was because they understood that spiritual knowledge can only be received when someone is ready to receive it. Otherwise, it's just noise. So when you have insights, when you understand something profound about the nature of reality or consciousness or love or purpose, hold it gently in your heart. Let it transform you. Let it change how you live. And if someone comes to you genuinely seeking, if they're ready to hear, you'll know, you'll feel it, and then you can share. But don't cast your pearls before swine, as the old saying goes. Don't give your precious spiritual insights to those who can't appreciate them. The fifth thing you must never reveal carelessly is your spiritual progress. When you're doing the work, when you're meditating and practicing and growing and transforming, you'll notice changes in yourself. You'll become more patient. You'll become less reactive. You'll find peace in situations that used to disturb you. You'll feel love for people you used to judge. You'll experience moments of pure joy for no reason at all. This is progress. This is growth. This is the fruit of your spiritual practice. But the moment you start announcing your progress to others, you run into problems. First, there's the ego trap. When you tell people how much you've grown spiritually, your ego is speaking. The part of you that's actually spiritually evolved doesn't need to announce it. It doesn't need recognition or validation. Only the ego needs that. So the very act of announcing your spiritual progress is evidence that you're not as far along as you think you are. Second, when you talk about your spiritual progress, you invite comparison and competition. Someone might say, well, I've been meditating for 20 years, as if spiritual growth is a contest. Someone else might feel inadequate because they're not where you are, and your sharing has actually made them feel worse about themselves, which is the opposite of what spiritual growth is supposed to do. Or someone might point out areas where you're still struggling, trying to bring you down a notch, and suddenly you're defending yourself and getting into conflict, which again shows that you're not as evolved as you were claiming to be. Third, announcing your spiritual progress can create expectations. People start expecting you to be peaceful all the time. They expect you never to get angry or frustrated or sad. They put you on a pedestal. And then when you're human, when you have a bad day or make a mistake or react poorly to something, they're disappointed. They might even accuse you of being a fraud. And now you're dealing with all of that energy instead of simply continuing your practice. The truth about spiritual progress is that it's not linear. You don't just keep moving forward in a straight line. You have breakthroughs and setbacks. You have days when you feel connected to everything and days when you feel lost and alone. You have moments of pure enlightenment and moments when you're completely caught up in ego. That's the nature of the path. And when you haven't announced your progress to anyone, you're free to have this very human, very real experience without the pressure of other people's expectations. Let me tell you something about true spiritual maturity. The more spiritually evolved someone actually is, the less they need to talk about it. They just live it. You feel it when you're around them. There's a peace that emanates from them. There's a love that flows through them. There's a wisdom in their words and a compassion in their actions. But they're not announcing it. They're not claiming it. They're simply being it. Think about the truly great spiritual teachers throughout history. Yes, they taught. Yes, they shared. But they didn't go around announcing how enlightened they were. They didn't make their spiritual progress the topic of conversation. They simply lived in alignment with spiritual principles, and their lives became the teaching. So what do you do instead? How do you navigate your spiritual awakening if you can't share these 5 things with everyone? First, find your tribe. Find the people who are on a similar path. They exist. They're out there. And when you find them, you'll know. You'll be able to share your experiences, your practices, your goals, your insights, and your progress with them, and they'll receive it with honor and respect. They'll understand. They'll support you. They'll celebrate your growth without making it about ego. These are your spiritual friends, your soul family. Cherish them. Second, keep a journal. Write about your experiences. Document your insights. Record your progress. This serves 2 purposes. It gives you an outlet for expression that doesn't require sharing with others who might not understand. And it creates a record of your growth that you can look back on later. You'll be amazed at how far you've come when you read entries from months or years ago. Third, trust the process. Trust that you don't need everyone's validation or understanding. Trust that your spiritual path is between you and the divine. Trust that the work you're doing in silence is more powerful than any words you could speak. Trust that when you transform yourself, you transform the world, even if nobody ever knows your story. Fourth, be discerning. Learn to sense who can receive what you have to share and who can't. This isn't about being judgmental, it's about being wise. It's about honoring both yourself and others by not putting them in a position where they feel compelled to respond to something they don't understand. When someone is ready, they'll ask, they'll seek, and you'll know that it's safe to share. Fifth, let your life be your message. Instead of talking about how spiritual you are, live spiritually. Be kind, be patient, be loving, be peaceful, be generous, be authentic, be present. When you live this way, you're teaching without words. You're sharing without announcing. You're transforming the world simply by being who you are. Now, I want to address something that might be coming up for you as you hear this. You might be thinking, but isn't this contradictory? If I'm supposed to keep all these things secret, then why are you sharing this teaching? Aren't you revealing spiritual knowledge? And that's a great question. Here's the distinction. I'm not sharing my personal experiences, my specific practices, my individual goals, my private insights, or my personal progress. I'm sharing a principle. I'm sharing a framework that can help you navigate your own spiritual awakening. And I'm sharing it in a space where people have chosen to listen, where they're seeking this kind of guidance. There's a difference between teaching spiritual principles and broadcasting your personal spiritual life. One is about serving others by sharing wisdom that can help them. The other is about feeding your ego by seeking validation or recognition. The question you always have to ask yourself is, why am I sharing this? Am I sharing it to help someone who's genuinely seeking? Or am I sharing it because I want to be seen as spiritual or special or evolved? The motive matters. Also, understand that there will be times when you make mistakes with this. You'll get excited about something you experienced, and you'll share it with the wrong person. You'll mention your meditation practice to someone who mocks it. You'll talk about your spiritual goals to someone who thinks they're ridiculous. And you'll feel that energy drain, that diminishment, that doubt creeping in. When this happens, don't beat yourself up. Just recognize it as a learning experience. You'll become more discerning over time. You'll develop better judgment about who to share with and who not to share with. The spiritual path is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about growing and learning and becoming more conscious. Every mistake is an opportunity to become wiser. Every misstep is a chance to course correct. Be gentle with yourself. Be patient with yourself. And keep going. Let me share something else with you that's really important. Protecting these 5 things isn't about building walls or isolating yourself. It's about creating healthy boundaries. There's a difference. Walls keep everyone out and keep you locked in. Boundaries allow healthy connection while protecting your energy and your growth. You can still be open, loving, and connected while maintaining these boundaries. In fact, these boundaries actually enable you to be more open, more loving, and more connected because you're not constantly dealing with the energy drain of sharing sacred things with people who can't receive them. Think of it like this. If you have a young plant, a seedling that's just starting to grow, you protect it. You don't put it in harsh sun immediately. You don't expose it to strong winds. You create the right conditions for it to develop strong roots and sturdy stems, and then, when it's strong enough, you can transplant it anywhere and it will thrive. Your spiritual awakening is like that seedling. Protect it in the early stages. Give it the right conditions to develop. And when you're rooted firmly in your spiritual truth, when you're strong in your practice, when you're solid in your understanding, then you can handle anything the world throws at you. Another thing I want you to understand is that this protective approach is actually an act of love. It's love for yourself, first of all. You're honoring your own spiritual growth as sacred. You're respecting your own process. You're taking care of your own energy. But it's also love for others. When you don't burden people with spiritual information they're not ready for, you're respecting where they are. You're not pushing them. You're not making them uncomfortable. You're allowing them to be on their own path at their own pace. There's a beautiful wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to be silent, in knowing when to share and when to hold back, in knowing when to teach and when to simply be. This wisdom comes from paying attention to energy, to intuition, to the subtle signals that tell you whether sharing will serve or harm. Develop this wisdom, trust it, act on it. Now, let's talk about what happens when you do protect these 5 things. What changes when you keep your spiritual experiences, practices, goals, insights, and progress sacred and private? First, you'll notice that your spiritual growth accelerates. All that energy that was leaking out through talking about your path is now going into walking your path. You're doing the work instead of discussing the work. And the work is what transforms you. Second, you'll develop a deeper connection with the divine. When your spiritual life is between you and the infinite, when it's not mediated through other people's opinions and reactions, it becomes purer. It becomes more authentic. You're not performing spirituality for an audience. You're living spirituality for yourself and for God, or source, or universe, or whatever word resonates with you for that highest power. Third, you'll find that you become more peaceful. You're not constantly defending your choices or explaining your experiences or justifying your path. You're simply walking it. And there's tremendous peace in that. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what you're doing without needing everyone else to understand or approve. Fourth, you'll discover that the people who are meant to be in your life will recognize your light without you having to announce it. They'll sense something different about you. They'll feel the peace you carry. They'll notice the love that flows from you, and they'll be drawn to it. These are the people who will ask you questions. These are the people who will seek your guidance. These are the people who will truly receive what you have to offer. And you won't have to chase them or convince them or prove anything to them. They'll simply know. Fifth, you'll become a living example of spiritual principles rather than just someone who talks about them. And this is the most powerful form of teaching there is. When people see that you're genuinely peaceful in situations that would disturb others, when they see that you're genuinely loving toward people that others would judge, when they see that you're genuinely joyful even when circumstances are challenging, they'll want what you have, and they'll be open to learning from you because your life has proven the validity of your path. I want to emphasize something here. This teaching about protecting these 5 things is not about being secretive for the sake of being secretive. It's not about creating mystery or playing spiritual games. It's about respecting the sacred nature of your own transformation and having the wisdom to know that not everyone can or should be privy to your most intimate spiritual experiences. Some things are meant to be held close. Some things are meant to be private, and that's okay. That's actually healthy. In our culture, we've become so accustomed to sharing everything. We post our thoughts on social media. We broadcast our feelings. We document every aspect of our lives for public consumption. But your spiritual life is not content. It's not something to be packaged and presented for likes and comments. It's the deepest, most profound part of who you are. It deserves to be treated with reverence and respect. When you wake up spiritually, you're being given a tremendous gift. You're being given the opportunity to see beyond the illusion, to connect with truth, to align with love, to experience the divine. Don't squander this gift by carelessly sharing it with those who will diminish it. Be wise, be discerning, be protective of this precious awakening that's happening within you. And remember, silence is not the same as hiding. Silence is not the same as shame. Silence is power. Silence is strength. Silence is the container within which transformation occurs. The butterfly doesn't announce to the world that it's transforming inside the cocoon. It simply does the work in darkness and silence. And when the transformation is complete, it emerges in all its beauty, and everyone can see the result. You don't need to narrate your transformation. You just need to undergo it. As you continue on your spiritual path, you'll find that these 5 things I've shared with you become natural to protect. You won't have to think about it or force it. You'll simply feel in your body when something should be kept private. You'll sense when sharing would be draining rather than nurturing. You'll know when to speak and when to remain silent. This is part of spiritual maturity. This is part of developing wisdom. And here's something beautiful that happens. When you protect these 5 things, when you create this sacred space around your spiritual life, you actually become more available to serve others because you're not depleted, you're not drained, you're not constantly dealing with the aftermath of sharing too much with the wrong people. You're full, you're energized, you're centered. And from that place of fullness, you can give generously to those who truly need what you have to offer. Your spiritual awakening is not about you becoming separate from the world. It's not about you becoming superior to others. It's not about you building some kind of exclusive club. It's about you becoming so fully yourself, so aligned with truth, so connected to love that you can be a healing presence in the world. But you can only do that if you protect your energy, honor your process, and respect the sacred nature of your transformation. So today, I'm asking you to make a commitment to yourself. Commit to protecting your spiritual experiences. Commit to keeping your practices private. Commit to holding your spiritual goals close to your heart. Commit to discerning who receives your spiritual insights. Commit to letting your life speak louder than your words about your spiritual progress. This commitment is not a burden. It's a gift you're giving yourself. It's a way of honoring the divine work that's happening within you. And as you make this commitment, trust that you're not alone on this path. There are many others who are awakening just like you. There are many others who understand the importance of protecting what's sacred. There are many others who are doing the work in silence, transforming themselves, and by extension, transforming the world. You're part of a great awakening that's happening on this planet. You're part of a shift in consciousness that's lifting humanity to a higher level. And your contribution to that shift is not about how much you talk about your spirituality, it's about how fully you live it. So keep your sacred things sacred. Walk your path with quiet confidence. Do your work with dedication and love. And trust that the universe sees you, knows you, and is supporting you every step of the way. You don't need anyone else's validation. You don't need anyone else's understanding. You need only your own commitment to truth, your own dedication to growth, and your own willingness to keep showing up for the work. The 5 things I've shared with you today are not rules, they're guidelines. They're wisdom that's been proven through experience, through observation, through seeing what happens when people protect their spiritual life and what happens when they don't. Take this wisdom and apply it to your own life. See how it feels. Notice what changes. And adjust as needed based on your own experience. Remember, the goal of spiritual awakening is not to become someone who talks about spirituality. The goal is to become someone who lives it so fully that words become unnecessary. The goal is to become a presence of peace in a chaotic world. The goal is to become a channel of love in a fearful world. The goal is to become a light in the darkness. And you can only do that when you protect the flame, when you shield it from the winds that would blow it out, when you give it the space and time and care it needs to grow strong. So go forward from here with this new understanding. Go forward with the wisdom to protect what's sacred. Go forward with the confidence that comes from knowing you're on the right path. Go forward with the peace that comes from not needing everyone to understand or approve. And most of all, go forward with love. Love for yourself, love for your path, love for the divine, and love for all beings everywhere. Your spiritual awakening is the most important thing happening in your life right now. Treat it as such. Honor it, protect it, nurture it, and watch as it transforms not just you, but everything and everyone you touch. This is your time. This is your awakening. Make it sacred, make it powerful, make it real. And remember, you don't have to tell anyone about it for it to change everything. You are standing at a crossroads right now. Every single day you wake up with a choice. You can continue living the same way you always have, or you can begin to shed the layers that have been keeping you small, keeping you stuck, keeping you from becoming the magnificent being you were meant to be. The spiritually awakened person understands something that most people never grasp. They understand that growth isn't about adding more to their lives. It's about taking away what doesn't serve them. It's about releasing, letting go, and creating space for the miraculous to enter. Today I want to share with you 7 things that every person on the path of spiritual awakening must slowly, gently, but surely release from their life. These aren't things you can eliminate overnight. They've been with you for years, maybe decades. They've become comfortable habits, familiar patterns, old friends that have overstayed their welcome. But here's what I know to be true. When you begin to let go of these 7 things, your life will transform in ways that will astound you. You'll find peace where there once was chaos. You'll find love where there once was fear. You'll find your true self where there once was only the mask you thought you had to wear. The first thing that spiritually awake people slowly quit is the need to be right all the time. Think about this for a moment. How much energy do you spend every day trying to prove that you're right? How many arguments do you get into? How many relationships do you strain because you simply cannot let someone else have their opinion without correcting them, without showing them where they're wrong? The need to be right is really the ego talking. It's that voice inside your head that says, if I'm not right, then I'm worthless. If I don't win this argument, then I'm less than. But what if I told you that being right isn't nearly as important as being happy? What if I told you that being right isn't nearly as valuable as being at peace? When you release the need to be right, something beautiful happens. You stop seeing other people as opponents and start seeing them as fellow travelers on this path called life. You stop needing to defend every little thing and start listening, really listening. And when you listen, you learn. When you listen, you grow. When you listen, you connect with others in a way that transforms both of you. I'm not saying you should become a doormat or that you should never stand up for what you believe in. What I'm saying is that you can choose your battles wisely. You can ask yourself, is this worth my peace? Is this worth damaging this relationship? Is this worth the stress I'm creating in my body and my mind? Most of the time the answer will be no. Most of the time you'll realize that being happy is so much more important than being right. And when you make that choice consistently, when you choose peace over being right, you'll find that your relationships improve dramatically. People will want to be around you because you're not constantly trying to correct them or prove them wrong. The second thing that spiritually awakened people slowly release is the addiction to approval from others. This is a big one, and it's something that most of us struggle with our entire lives. From the time we're children, we're taught to seek approval. We want our parents to approve of us. But here's the problem with living your life seeking approval from others. You're giving away your power. You're allowing other people to determine your worth. You're living your life according to what you think they want, instead of what you know is right for you. The truth is, you can never get enough approval to fill the hole inside you that craves it. There will always be someone who doesn't approve of your choices, your appearance, your beliefs, your lifestyle. If you're living for their approval, you'll spend your entire life chasing something that's constantly moving, constantly changing, constantly out of reach. When you begin to release the need for approval, you start living from your authentic self. You start making decisions based on what feels right to you, not what you think will make others happy. You start wearing what you want to wear, saying what you want to say, doing what you want to do, not because you're rebelling, but because you're finally being true to yourself. This doesn't mean you become selfish or inconsiderate. It means you stop betraying yourself to please others. It means you stop saying yes when you mean no. It means you stop pretending to be someone you're not just to fit in. The people who truly love you will love you for who you really are, not for who you pretend to be. The people who only love you when you're seeking their approval aren't really loving you at all. They're loving the version of you that makes them comfortable. So when you release the need for approval, you give others permission to do the same. You become a model for authentic living. You show others that it's possible to be yourself and still be loved, still be respected, still be valued. The third thing that spiritually conscious people slowly let go of is the habit of complaining. Complaining has become so normal in our society that we don't even realize we're doing it half the time. We complain about the weather, the traffic, the government, our jobs, our families, our health, our finances. We've made complaining a form of entertainment, a way to connect with others, a daily ritual. But complaining is one of the most destructive habits you can have. When you complain, you're focusing on what's wrong instead of what's right. You're putting your attention on problems instead of solutions. You're training your brain to look for the negative in every situation. What you focus on expands. When you spend your time complaining, you're actually creating more things to complain about. You're programming your mind to see problems everywhere. You're lowering your vibration and attracting more negativity into your life. Now, I'm not saying you should never acknowledge problems or challenges. I'm not saying you should pretend everything is perfect when it's not. What I'm saying is that there's a difference between acknowledging a problem and complaining about it. When you acknowledge a problem, you're taking the first step towards solving it. When you complain about a problem, you're just wallowing in it. When you acknowledge a challenge, you're empowering yourself to overcome it. When you complain about a challenge, you're making yourself a victim of it. Instead of complaining, try this. For every problem you identify, come up with at least one possible solution. For every challenge you face, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can this make me stronger, wiser, more compassionate? When you stop complaining and start looking for solutions, your entire life changes. You become a problem solver instead of a problem dweller. You become someone who creates positive change instead of someone who just talks about what's wrong. The fourth thing that awakened souls gradually release is the need to control everything and everyone around them. Control is an illusion, but it's an illusion that many of us cling to desperately. We think that if we can just control our circumstances, our relationships, our future, then we'll be safe, we'll be happy, we'll be secure. But the truth is, the only thing you can really control is yourself. You can't control what other people do, what they say, how they react, what they choose. You can't control the weather, the economy, natural disasters, or any of the countless variables that make up life. When you try to control things that are outside your control, you create stress, anxiety, and frustration for yourself. You waste enormous amounts of energy trying to manipulate situations and people instead of focusing on what you actually can influence. The need to control often comes from fear. We're afraid that if we don't control everything, something bad will happen. We're afraid that people will make choices we don't like. We're afraid that life won't unfold the way we think it should. But when you release the need to control, something magical happens. You start to trust. You start to have faith that things will work out, maybe not exactly as you planned, but in the way that's best for everyone involved. You start to see that there's a wisdom in life that's greater than your limited perspective. When you stop trying to control others, your relationships improve dramatically. People feel free to be themselves around you. They don't feel like they have to walk on eggshells or pretend to be someone they're not. They trust you because they know you're not trying to manipulate them or change them. When you stop trying to control circumstances, you become more adaptable, more resilient, more at peace. You learn to flow with life instead of fighting against it. You learn to find opportunity in unexpected situations. You learn to see challenges as chances to grow instead of as problems to solve. The fifth thing that spiritually aware people slowly quit is living in the past or the future instead of the present moment. Most of us spend very little time actually living in the now. We're either rehashing the past, worrying about things that have already happened, feeling guilty about mistakes we made, or we're projecting into the future, worrying about things that might happen, planning for scenarios that may never come to pass. But life is happening right now. This moment is the only moment you actually have. The past is gone. You can't change it. The future hasn't happened yet. You can't control it. All you have is right now. And right now is where your power is. When you're constantly thinking about the past, you're missing out on the present. When you're always worried about the future, you're not fully experiencing what's happening now. You're living in your head instead of living your life. The present moment is where joy is found. It's where peace exists. It's where love lives. When you're fully present, you notice things you've been missing. You taste your food more fully. You hear music more clearly. You see beauty that was always there, but that you were too distracted to notice. Being present also means you're more effective in whatever you're doing. When your mind is scattered between the past and the future, your performance suffers. When you're fully focused on what you're doing right now, you do it better. You make fewer mistakes, you're more creative, you're more efficient. Learning to live in the present moment is a practice. It takes time to develop. You've probably spent years, maybe decades, living in your head, so it's going to take some effort to break that pattern. But every moment you spend fully present is a moment well lived. Start small. When you're eating, really taste your food. When you're walking, feel your feet on the ground. When someone's talking to you, really listen to their words instead of thinking about what you're going to say next. When you're in nature, take in the sights, sounds, and smells around you. The sixth thing that people on the spiritual path gradually let go of is the habit of judging others. Judgment is one of the most common and destructive habits we have. We judge people based on their appearance, their choices, their beliefs, their lifestyle. We create entire stories about people based on tiny pieces of information. But when you judge others, you're really revealing more about yourself than about them. Your judgments are based on your own experiences, your own fears, your own insecurities. They're not objective truths about the people you're judging. Judgment also separates you from others. When you judge someone, you're putting them in a category, you're making them different from you, you're creating distance between you and them. But the truth is, we're all much more alike than we are different. We all want to be loved. We all want to be understood. We all want to be valued. Everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. Everyone has a story that has shaped who they are. Everyone has fears, hopes, dreams, and struggles. When you judge someone, you're ignoring their humanity. You're reducing them to a single characteristic or action. Instead of judging others, try to understand them. Try to see them with compassion. Try to remember that they're doing the best they can with what they have. This doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone or approve of everyone's choices. It just means you can see them as fellow human beings who are trying to figure out life just like you are. But when you stop judging others, you also stop judging yourself as harshly. The same voice that judges others is the voice that judges you. When you develop compassion for others, you develop compassion for yourself. When you see others with understanding, you see yourself with understanding. The seventh and final thing that spiritually awakened people slowly release is the belief that they are victims of their circumstances. This might be the most important one of all. As long as you see yourself as a victim, you're powerless. As long as you believe that your happiness, your success, your peace depends on external circumstances, you're at the mercy of a world you can't control. The victim mentality says, I can't be happy because of what happened to me. I can't succeed because of my background. I can't change because of my circumstances. But this is giving away all your power to external things and other people. Now, I'm not minimizing the real challenges and traumas that people face. I'm not saying that everyone has the same opportunities or that life is fair. What I'm saying is that regardless of what has happened to you, regardless of your current circumstances, you still have the power to choose your response. You can't always choose what happens to you, but you can always choose how you respond to what happens to you. You can choose your attitude, you can choose your perspective, you can choose your actions, you can choose whether to focus on what you've lost or what you still have. You can choose whether to see obstacles as roadblocks or as stepping stones. When you release the victim mentality, you reclaim your power. You stop waiting for someone else to rescue you and start rescuing yourself. You stop blaming others for your problems and start taking responsibility for your solutions. You stop looking outside yourself for happiness and start creating it from within. This doesn't happen overnight. If you've been thinking of yourself as a victim for years, It's going to take time to change that pattern. But every time you choose to take responsibility instead of blame, every time you choose to look for solutions instead of dwelling on problems, every time you choose to see opportunities instead of obstacles, you're moving away from victimhood and toward empowerment. The beautiful thing about releasing these 7 things is that you don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to eliminate them from your life completely before you start seeing benefits. Every small step you take, every moment of awareness, every conscious choice to let go of what doesn't serve you moves you closer to the person you're meant to be. You might find that you make progress in one area and then slip back into old patterns. That's okay, that's normal. That's part of the process. The key is to be gentle with yourself, to be patient with yourself, to remember that change takes time. Some days you'll remember to stay present, and other days you'll find yourself lost in worry about the future. Some days you'll choose peace over being right, and other days you'll get caught up in an argument. Some days you'll take responsibility for your life, and other days you'll slip into victim thinking. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress. The goal is awareness. The goal is to catch yourself more quickly when you fall into these old patterns and to choose differently. As you begin to release these 7 things, you'll notice changes in your life that might surprise you. Your relationships will improve because you're no longer trying to control or judge the people around you. Your stress levels will decrease because you're no longer fighting reality or trying to be right all the time. Your happiness will increase because you're no longer depending on external approval or circumstances for your peace. You'll also find that you have more energy. These 7 habits are incredibly draining. When you're constantly trying to control everything, judge everyone, complain about everything, prove you're right, seek approval, live in the past or future, and see yourself as a victim, you're using up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy. When you release these habits, you free up that energy for things that actually matter. You can use it to create, to love, to grow, to contribute. You can use it to pursue your dreams, to build meaningful relationships, to make a positive difference in the world. You'll also find that you become more attractive to other people. Not necessarily in a physical sense, although that might happen too, but in an energetic sense. People are naturally drawn to those who are at peace with themselves, who don't need to prove anything, who don't judge others, who take responsibility for their own lives. When you embody these qualities, you become a source of inspiration for others. You show them what's possible. You give them permission to let go of their own limiting patterns. You become a light in a world that often seems dark. The path of spiritual awakening isn't always easy. It requires you to look at yourself honestly, to acknowledge patterns that aren't serving you, to make changes that might feel uncomfortable at first. It requires you to let go of familiar ways of thinking and being, even when those ways have become like old friends. But the rewards are beyond measure. When you live from this awakened place, when you've released these 7 things that keep most people stuck, you experience a peace that passes understanding. You experience joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. You experience love that flows freely from your heart to everyone you meet. And you realize that you were never broken to begin with, you were never lacking, you were never less than enough, you were just covered up by layers of conditioning, layers of fear, layers of false beliefs about who you had to be to survive in this world. As you peel away these layers, as you release what doesn't serve you, your true self begins to shine through. And your true self is magnificent. Your true self is wise. Your true self is loving. Your true self is peaceful. Your true self is everything you've been seeking outside yourself. The process of awakening is really a process of remembering who you really are beneath all the roles you play, all the masks you wear, all the strategies you've developed to get through life. You're remembering that you are a spiritual being having a human experience, not a human being trying to have a spiritual experience. This remembering changes everything. When you know who you really are, you don't need others to validate you. When you know your true nature, you don't need to control everything around you. When you know your worth, you don't need to prove you're right. When you know your power, you don't see yourself as a victim. The 7 things I've shared with you today are really just symptoms of forgetting who you are. When you remember, when you wake up to your true nature, these things naturally fall away. They lose their grip on you because they no longer serve the person you know yourself to be. Be patient with yourself as you walk this path. Be gentle with yourself as you learn to let go. Remember that every master was once a beginner. Every person who seems to have it all figured out was once where you are now, taking the first steps toward awakening. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're listening to these words, the fact that something inside you is stirring and wanting to change tells me that you're ready. You're ready to release what's been holding you back. You're ready to step into who you're meant to be. You're ready to wake up to the magnificent being you've always been. Trust the process, trust yourself, trust that life is supporting your awakening in ways you might not even be able to see yet, and know that every step you take toward releasing these 7 things is a step toward the freedom, peace, and joy that are your birthright. Your awakening doesn't just benefit you, it benefits everyone whose life you touch. When you stop judging, you give others permission to be themselves. When you stop trying to control, you allow others to find their own way. When you stop complaining, you inspire others to look for solutions. When you take responsibility for your life, you show others that they can do the same. You become a force for good in this world, not by trying to change everyone else, but by changing yourself. You become a beacon of hope, not by preaching to others, but by living the truth you've awakened to. You become a teacher, not by telling others what to do, but by showing them what's possible. This is the path of the spiritually awakened person. This is the journey from unconsciousness to consciousness, from fear to love, from separation to unity, from victimhood to empowerment. It's the most important journey you'll ever take, and it starts with a single step. Today, right now, in this moment, you can take that step. You can choose to release just one of these 7 things. You can choose to respond differently the next time someone disagrees with you. You can choose to catch yourself the next time you start complaining. You can choose to stay present for just one conversation today. Small steps lead to big changes. Consistent choices create lasting transformation. And every moment offers you a fresh opportunity to choose differently, to be different, to live from the awakened place within you that has been waiting patiently for you to remember who you really are. The time is now. The person is you. The path is before you. All that's required is the willingness to let go of what no longer serves you and to embrace the magnificent being you were born to be. Your awakening is not just possible, it's inevitable. The question is not if, but when, and I believe that when is now. As you continue on this path of awakening, you'll begin to notice something beautiful happening in your daily life. The ordinary moments start to feel extraordinary. A simple conversation with a stranger becomes an opportunity for connection. A sunset that you might have rushed past before now stops you in your tracks with its beauty. The laughter of a child reminds you of the joy that exists in pure presence. This transformation happens because you're no longer filtering everything through the lens of these 7 limiting patterns. You're not constantly evaluating whether someone approves of you so you can actually see them for who they are. You're not trying to control the outcome of every interaction so you can be genuinely curious about what unfolds. You're not judging everyone you meet so you can appreciate their unique gifts and perspectives. When you live this way, you start to see synchronicities everywhere. The right book falls into your hands at exactly the right moment. You run into someone who has exactly the information you need. Opportunities appear that seem almost too perfect to be coincidence. This isn't magic, although it might feel like it. This is what happens when you align with the flow of life instead of fighting against it. Your intuition becomes stronger and clearer. When you're not constantly caught up in mental chatter about what went wrong yesterday or what might go wrong tomorrow, you create space for your inner wisdom to speak. You start to trust that quiet voice inside you that knows things your logical mind hasn't figured out yet. You make decisions that feel right in your gut, even when you can't explain why. Relationships take on a completely different quality. When you're not trying to get anything from other people, When you're not trying to change them or fix them or impress them, you can simply enjoy them for who they are. You become genuinely interested in their stories, their dreams, their challenges. You listen not to respond but to understand. You love not to possess but to appreciate. This shift in how you relate to others creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond your immediate circle. Children feel safer around you because they sense your authenticity. Animals are drawn to your peaceful energy. Even strangers seem more open and friendly when they encounter you. You realize that who you are being affects everyone around you in ways you might never fully understand. Your creativity blossoms in ways you never expected. When you're not spending all your mental energy on worry, control, judgment, and the need to be right, that energy becomes available for creative expression. You might find yourself writing, painting, singing, dancing, or creating in ways you haven't since you were a child. You rediscover the joy of creating something just for the pure pleasure of creating it. Your work life transforms as well. Whether you're in the same job or you find yourself drawn to something completely different, you approach your work from a new perspective. You're not working just to get approval or to prove your worth. You're contributing your gifts to the world. You're serving others through your unique talents and abilities. Work becomes less about what you get and more about what you give. Money takes on a different meaning too. You realize that your security doesn't come from your bank account but from your connection to the infinite abundance of the universe. This doesn't mean you become careless with money or that you don't need to be practical. It means you don't live in fear about money. You trust that when you're living from your authentic self, when you're contributing your gifts to the world, you'll be supported. Your physical health often improves when you release these 7 patterns. Stress is one of the biggest contributors to illness, and these patterns create enormous amounts of stress in your body. When you stop fighting with reality, when you stop needing to control everything, when you stop judging and complaining, your body relaxes. Your immune system strengthens. You sleep better. You have more energy. You might also find that you naturally make healthier choices without forcing yourself. When you're living from your authentic self, you naturally want to treat your body well. You eat foods that nourish you, not to punish yourself or because you should, but because you love yourself enough to care for the vessel that carries you through this life. The relationship you have with yourself becomes the foundation for everything else in your life. When you're not constantly seeking approval from others, you learn to approve of yourself. When you're not judging others, you stop being so harsh with yourself. When you take responsibility for your life instead of seeing yourself as a victim, you empower yourself to create the life you want. Self-care becomes a natural expression of self-love rather than something you have to force yourself to do. You take time for solitude not because you're running away from the world, but because you enjoy your own company. You say no to things that drain your energy, not because you're being selfish, but because you understand that taking care of yourself allows you to show up better for others. Your spiritual practice, whatever form it takes, becomes less about following rules or doing things perfectly and more about connecting with something greater than yourself. Whether you pray, meditate, spend time in nature, or simply sit in silence, these moments become precious opportunities to remember who you really are beneath all the roles and responsibilities. You begin to see the sacred in the ordinary. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on gratitude for having food to eat and dishes to eat from. Waiting in line becomes an opportunity to practice patience and presence. Traffic jams become chances to listen to music you love or to appreciate the engineering marvel of the roads and cars around you. As your perspective shifts, you realize that every experience, even the difficult ones, has been serving your growth in some way. The job you hated taught you what you don't want and pointed you toward what you do want. The relationship that ended painfully taught you about your own patterns and helped you develop compassion. The financial struggles taught you about resourcefulness and gratitude. This doesn't mean you become grateful for suffering or that you believe everything happens for a reason in some predetermined way. It means you develop the ability to find meaning and growth opportunities in whatever life presents to you. You become resilient, not because you're tough, but because you're flexible. You bend with life's storms instead of breaking. Your compassion extends not just to other people, but to all of life. You see the interconnectedness of everything. You understand that harming others ultimately harms yourself, and that healing yourself contributes to the healing of the world. You make choices that consider not just your immediate needs, but the needs of future generations and the planet that supports all life. This expanded awareness brings with it a sense of responsibility, but it's not a heavy burden. It's the joyful responsibility of someone who has found their place in the grand symphony of existence and wants to play their part beautifully. You contribute to the world not because you have to, but because you can't help but overflow with the love and wisdom you cultivated within yourself. The changes that occur as you release these 7 patterns happen gradually, like the slow turning of seasons. One day you realize that you haven't complained about anything in weeks. Another day you notice that you stayed completely present during an entire conversation. Gradually you discover that you're responding to challenges with curiosity instead of resistance, with trust instead of fear. People around you might not understand the changes they see in you. Some might even feel threatened by your peace, because it highlights their own inner turmoil. Some might try to pull you back into old patterns of drama, gossip, or negativity. Remember that this is not about them. This is their own fear of change, their own attachment to familiar patterns, even when those patterns cause suffering. Stay true to your path. Be patient with those who don't understand. Love them anyway. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is simply being a living example of what's possible. Your peace becomes their invitation. Your joy becomes their hope. Your authenticity becomes their permission to be real too. The awakening process is not linear. You don't graduate from one level to the next and never look back. There will be days when old patterns resurface. There will be times when you catch yourself complaining, judging, trying to control, or seeking approval. When this happens, don't judge yourself for it. Simply notice it, smile at yourself with compassion, and choose differently. Each time you catch yourself and choose differently, you're strengthening new neural pathways in your brain. You're literally rewiring your consciousness. Every moment of awareness is a victory. Every choice to respond differently is a step toward freedom. Every act of self-compassion is an act of healing, not just for yourself, but for the collective consciousness of humanity. I remember that awakening is not a destination you reach and then you're done. It's an ongoing process of becoming more conscious, more loving, more authentic, more free. It's a lifetime practice of returning again and again to your true self whenever you notice you've wandered away. The 7 things you're releasing were never who you really are. They were learned responses, survival strategies, adaptations to a world that sometimes felt unsafe or unwelcoming. As you let them go, you're not losing anything important. You're uncovering the diamond that was always there beneath the dust. You're remembering the song you came here to sing. You're awakening to the love you came here to be.